Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Jason here. Jason, you're the CEO of Mekanism. You've been behind so many different interesting creative campaigns. Whether it's for Charles Schwab and for really the banking space and helping to make that more relatable, or it's for people in the entertainment area with Martha Stewart and a campaign there. And you've just been really innovative and creative in a lot of your ideas, and you've helped bridge gaps between demographics of people to get those types of demographics. Whether it's maybe the targeted, whether it's different ones, but maybe the targeted ones of some of these brands that they haven't been able to explore yet into the kind of areas for those brands. So I'm just excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Hey, Ben, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So Jason, where did your interest initially in wanting to be into business leadership and be in the creative space? How did this kind of passion start?
I really, from when I was a small kid, was into advertising. So I think a lot of people fall into by happenstance what they end up doing it for a career. But I remember being like 12 or 13 and watching a lot of TV, and I'd see the ads in between the shows, and I was like, "Oh, someone does that for a living. I want to figure out how to do that." So, even like early teenage years, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go into advertising. That seems cool. It seems creative." I was really into storytelling and comic books and sci-fi books, and I was just always into adventures and storytelling, and I thought that'd be a good career because it's business focused, but you're doing it for building brands. That's You're trying to tell brand stories. So when I went to college, I went to keep my parents happy. I majored in economics, but I knew I was never going to do anything with that. I wasn't going to go into finance. And so I started early on, just kind of lobbying to get my foot in the door in advertising. And then that's all I've done my entire career. So I was a weird kid.
So how did you kind of first, Jason, get your start industry wise? So you knew you had this passion, you wanted to be in the ad space. What did it take to get your first foot in the door?
So I actually started doing field marketing for a company that worked for Miller Genuine Draft, so Miller Brewing Company, and I would go around to bars. It's called field marketing, but I would go around to bars and pop up these inflatables, and we had the Miller Genuine Draft models, and we would get people to buy beer at on premise or off premise, and then the models would sign the posters. So it wasn't a bad first gig, but I got into field marketing through that, and then I got my first job at a design firm, and then I leveraged that to get a job at an advertising agency, and that's really kind of was my path. So whenever you're looking to get into a field, even just getting a tangential job related to that field helps you sort of build up those hours and that work to get your next job. And so I knew where I was trying to get to, and I knew one day I wanted to start something, but I knew I had to learn the ropes and go through working at other places before I started something. And so I had it pretty mapped out. And then you kind of just, it's hard to get jobs when you're starting out. So I just kind of took whatever job that was in the field related that I could get. And that just happened to be my first job.
Mm-hmm. When did you think it was the right time for you to really build your own company and create Mekanism?
So that's a really good question, because I think a lot of, I have a philosophy on that, and a lot of people might think, you could start a company at any time. And I think the sweet spot for an entrepreneur is really in between a little bit of experience, but where you're young enough that the risk isn't catastrophic. So that's my philosophy on it. So maybe, and you can certainly start a company when you have a family, and maybe you're further along, and a lot of people do that also. My belief, my path was, I'm going to work at a bunch of places, and I kept a journal at all the places I went to, and I would write down what I loved about the culture, what I hated about the culture, what I liked about my manager, what I learned about advertising, and it was all building towards, I want to start something and take all these lessons into the thing that I'm going to create. And that was sort of, I knew where I wanted to end up and where to go. But you can also fall into never starting your own business and just sort of moving up at another company or another agency. And so at one point, I was like, all right, I think I have enough experience and I'm young enough that I can, eat ramen noodles for a couple years and it's not going to kill me.
Mm.
And that was probably like in my late 20s, early 30s when we started the company. And that was I did it with a couple friends. I had started a smaller thing before on my own and I burned out on that really quickly.
Mm.
And then Mechanism started with three other co-founders. So we did it together and it was real scrappy for several years. But, then it kind of built and grew over time and, we're pretty sizable today and still around. So we made
Mm.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jason, what were you thinking like was kind of the niche of Mechanism at the time? Like, what were avenues based on your experience being in the ad space that you thought, we need to build in, we need to create something innovative and different and build this new company around those?
So I'm a real big fan of the power of the pivot. And I think you have to always be, and I think it's why we've been around for so long, but you have to always be thinking around, looking around the corners and what is happening in the marketplace that you have to be on top of. And when we started as a creative production company where at the time when we started, you would shoot a commercial or do a production, and then there'd be another company that would do like maybe the digital production or the digital assets. So we started a company that did film and content and digital all at the same time, and that was very novel when we
Mm.
started it. And then we had another pivot uh, a couple years later where when the advent of like viral marketing happened and we would create like viral content for brands, and that's when we were doing more strategy and creative as well as production. And then when that sort of phase wore out, we then became a full service agency where we would do creative strategy, run brands, get on retainers. And then we did that for a period of time. And now our sort of latest pivot is we built really full funnel so we can do performance. We buy and plan media as well as doing the creative. And so we kind of added services. And now we're doing a lot in the digital space, a lot in performance space. Our positioning is it's probably about a year and a half or so old. Is Soul and Science, where we do the soul part. You can see the sign behind me. The soul part is about heart pounding emotional work, and then the science is driving measurable business results. So doing a lot of like CRM and loyalty programs and digital initiatives. And so that's just a long winded answer to your question, which is you always, whenever you start something, you're not thinking about it as this is a big idea and it's done. You're thinking about it as always evolving. Like, what are you adding on that's going to make it modern and future proof? And how do you stay relevant? So we're thinking about, we create an AI lab. How are we infusing AI into all of our work so that we can, do things faster and more efficient? So you always have to be, but you got to be careful with that too, because, we could have become a metaverse agency or like an NFT focused agency, or, like you
Mhm.
got to kind of figure out what is it that's like what we do, but you're adding something that's future proof without chasing every trend and then running into like an alley where it stops.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. It's you have to figure out your kind of focus, and that just over time it shifts. It can change.
Over time it shifts. You got to add services and new ways to reach the market and what's the market expecting
Mhm.
from you. And you have to quickly, add those and evolve, but not chase everything.
So
Yeah.
back when you were in that like viral video phase of
Yeah.
your growth, right? And I'm sure you even do some viral video stuff now. Like, would you say there's like a secret sauce to it? Like, there's things that you can do in the beginning of the video to catch people that are tried and true that help get it more traction? Is there a way the video can flow? Like, what are some of these fundamentals maybe that you've seen have really led to a lot of viral videos?
Well, it's really changed over time, but I remember we did a very successful campaign for, this was back in the day, but it was with 20th Century Fox, and it was for the new Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And we did like, uh, our whole thesis was that the apes are getting smarter. And so we shot like fake, but they seemed like real videos of apes with an AK-47 and things that apes can't do. But we filmed it in a, fake reality way where it looked real. And that created a lot of viral traction for the film. And so that was one that was really popular. We did big campaign with Microsoft, with Dimitri Martin, who was, becoming popular at the time. It was called Clarification. It was a whole video series. So you think about, um, what is a thing that might be shareable or passed around that is different and stands out and unique, and then obviously, even today, it's still relevant. Who are the creators? We used to call them influencers. Who are those guys and girls that are relevant to this brand that will help propel the message so that people will see your message? And you got to partner with those folks early on. And that's still relevant today, leveraging creators and bringing them in on the idea and having them create content around the idea. And then you want to launch in a big fashion where it feels like on one day or one week, it's popping up everywhere. You got to be like very targeted with your spend. So those are still some tactics we employ today. But when we were doing viral marketing, there was whatever, hundreds of hours being uploaded every minute on YouTube. So it was much easier. You just did something that was cool and people would see it, but that's no longer the case. Now you have to spend money for people to see it.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you put together this like campaign for Alaska Airlines, and it was kind of an interesting campaign. It was focusing on how they care about their customers, which we think every business just by default really cares about their customers. But this was like a standout, a theme of this Alaska Airlines campaign. Why focus on that, and why really bring that out is something that was the priority.
Yeah. So the strategy, whenever you're creating a campaign, you really have to have a couple elements for it to work. Like, the sort of recipe is it has to be clear and simple. It has to be ownable for the brand, and it has to stand out in the category. And you have to kind of almost go through like that checklist before you present an idea or you have an idea. And what one exercise we like to do through Soul and Science is come up with the one thing that the brand stands for. And we noticed that Alaska always won, best in customer service on all those JD Power awards. And so in a category that people love to hate, like the airline industry, we're like, well, let's just stand for care. And if that can be the one word, the most caring airline, if that can be the thing Alaska stands for over the next several years, you can riff off of that. And you have a good idea when it has a lot of legs. And that idea of care, we care a lot. That went through like all the way from like the internal employees and how they talked to the customer service reps and what the scripts they wrote, how they talked to the customers at check-in, the work that we put out there for marketing. But that is really, all right, we're going to have them, they've been awarded for it. So it's true to the brand. We're not making it up, but we have to infuse it throughout the whole company and have them have the customer stay for care. And that's what we're going to do. That's differentiated in the category. It's true and ownable for the brand, and it's simple and clear. So it like checked all the boxes, and then we just iterate off of that as we go. Like we're doing a new campaign with them now, which is about premiumizing the idea, and it's premium care. So more leg room, better service, better food on their flights, better entertainment. And so you can take that and sort of evolve it over time. Yeah.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
how do these like kind of campaigns, how do you figure out like the foundation for a campaign? Is most of the time is it you guys go into like strategy sessions and talk with the brand, or do they kind of come in with the direction? Like does it really, like how long does it take and what kind of goes into this?
Well, when you're sort of repositioning a brand, that can take, months, right? When you're evolving a brand after you've landed on what it can stand for, you can iterate and come up with ideas much faster. But it always starts with a creative strategy, and the creative strategy has to be done through insights. And we use a 4-box quadrant to come up with the insights. And that is talking about the category. So, research on what is in the category, what's working in the category, where can we stand out in the category. And then it's 4 C's. And then the other C is the customer, doing customer interviews, talking to, panels, doing like that, the research that you see on like commercials where they're in focus groups. And talking to the customer is another way that we come up with ideas. And then culture is the third C, and that's like what's popping right now in culture. What makes this brand relevant? What do people care about? If we're talking to a younger audience, what does Gen Z care about? If we're talking to millennials, what do they care about? But what's happening within that culture? So it's what's happening in for the category, what's happening with the customer, what's happening in culture. And then the other one is really about the brand or the client. Like what facets do they have? What are they doing that's improving service or a product or a new line? And then you put those 4 C's together and you'll create a strategy that's kind of in the center of those. And then that's the strategy you sell to the client. And then when they buy off on the strategy, then you come back with usually 3 to 5 directions off of that approved strategy. And then they zero in on one, or they'll combine a couple, or they won't like anything. You have to come back with new work. But that's really how we do it in a 4C format.
So you've got a whole like system set up.
Yeah, it's a whole system, and it's repeatable and scalable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned like kind of catering towards different age groups, and figuring out, like where, like how do you be able to address them properly? So one of the aspects I think that a lot of that, maybe certain brands want is trying to be able to create a trend and actually build up something that's new. How do you do research or maybe talk to different people? Like what goes into figuring out how to create a new trend or create something that isn't yet based on what's currently trendy in certain demographics?
So, like a trend, if you're talking about a macro trend or like a TikTok trend
The
or
macro trend.
a macro trend, um, yeah, I mean, sometimes those things you can't really predict. You sort of have to um, let them happen. Like the grimace shake for McDonald's, which they didn't really do, but they capitalized on it once it happened. Or what's that big? What's that thing everyone drinks now? That like that. Oh man, what is it called? You know what I'm talking about?
No, just give me a little more
Everyone drinks
context.
water out of.
Everyone drinks.
Uh, I should know this. Um, it's oh man, what the hell is it called? I'm blanking on it. All right, can we scrap this part?
Yeah, we'll cut this part.
There was like a burning car, and this thing was like left inside. Um,
Stanley Cups?
yes,
That's what
thank
Lillian
you.
said. Yeah.
Huh? Thank you,
Lillian.
Lillian. Jesus, I blanked on it. Yeah. So like that's a trend where like Stanley Cup, there's this viral video of a woman whose car went up in flames, but the Stanley Cup was left untouched. And the Stanley Cup then bought the woman a new car, and they did all this promotional work around how tough Stanley Cups are, and then they quadrupled their sales, and that became a trend. So some things, when you talk about creating trends, they're reactionary to events that happen, and the importance for those trends are speed and
Mhm.
speed to market and realizing, oh, something's happening, we're going to jump on that. Um, Creating more macro cultural trends that really, for a brand, takes, maybe it's partnership. So we did a big partnership with the show Love Is Blind.
Mhm.
So we did a big partnership with Netflix for a brand called Cupcake Wines, and we used big trend was this show and this reality show Love Is Blind. So we partnered with Netflix and created a product for Cupcake called Love Is Wine, and then we used all the Love Is Blind contestants to promote it, and it sold out in like 24 hours. And partnerships are another way to really get ahead of trends and promote the brand through what's happening in culture that's popular, and then partnering with that brand so that your brand can sort of get that halo effect from whatever's trending in culture.
Mm. So how do you determine like overall the success of a campaign that you're working on? Like, do you generally set goals with clients like in the beginning and they have a certain amount of expectations? And like, have there been cases where you've had success in other areas that maybe you didn't expect? And what did you learn from those?
That's a good question. So I would say in the past 3 years, there's been a real shift in the industry from, there's always like brand marketing and performance marketing. And performance is much more measurable, and it's about sales goals, or it's about downloads, or it's about, promotion. And then brand marketing takes more time to build. So it's a longer tail, and you're building the brand over a couple years to get have people understand what the brand stands for over time. And that's really what Soul and Science is, that Mechanism does. It's about putting those two things together. Soul is really the brand building, science is really that measurable result. So when we have a brief for a client, we do both of those. And so we'll ask them, what's the brand for the next year and a half? What do you want this brand to do? What are we measuring? Are we measuring against sentiment, understanding, brand affinity? And then that's one metric. And then the science metric might be, we need to have, 500,000 people open new accounts at Charles Schwab or switch to Charles Schwab. And that's more measurable, and you're going to use different tactics against that. But to answer your question, we push our clients to have measurable KPIs in both of
Mhm.
those categories so that we can see the effectiveness of our work. Because if your work's effective, your client's going to stay with you. And if your stuff is amorphous and you can't really measure it, and you set out to do one goal, but you got some other goal, you're not really going to keep that client. So we're really particular upfront about setting those goals and being clear about those goals, and then engineering the way we're going to achieve those goals. But we always have a soul KPI and a science KPI.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And would you say that a lot of it shifted from like performance marketing of we want these specific numbers to, we want certain numbers and we also want a certain awareness around it? Or is like, what kind of shift has there been?
So it really, for the past couple of years, has shifted much more into the performance side. So
Mhm.
more one-to-one marketing, more community building, more sales numbers. And I think the CMOs for a lot of brands have sort of forgotten about the power of and the need to have a strong brand and brand equity. And it's now shifting back. It always goes in waves. Like our industry always cycles through it. And we're now going back to, all right, well, you really need both. And you can't forget about the expensive longer term brand building, because if you just focus on numbers and sales or whatever you're trying to achieve through performance, the brand is going to get less strong, and you need both of those things to be working in concert. So it's shifting back to brand.
Hmm. So, Jason, just the last question that I have. Um, what do you aspire to accomplish now? What are some of your, let's say, 5 to 10 year goals for Mechanism, or even just personal goals too? What do you hope to accomplish?
So we were independent for about 17 years, and in 2022 we got acquired, and we sold to a network that's based in Canada. It's called Plus Company, and so my goal is really to grow the U.S. footprint for this company, and I'm really focused on growth right now for the network. And then personal goals. I wrote a book in 2019 called The Soulful Art of Persuasion, and I'm working on another one now. So every 3 to 5 years, I want to be writing a book that is usually about leadership or entrepreneurship. So those are my personal goals, and then from a business standpoint, just really growing the network that we're part of now.
Sounds good. Well, Jason, appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I think it's pretty interesting how you went from just trying to get your foot in the door and taking whatever jobs you could, and built up something that's had a great impact and on a lot of different companies, helped move the bottom line for them, which has in turn done a lot of great things for them. And you've been wanting to give that knowledge back through your own podcast, through the book that you mentioned, and through your other work. So appreciate you coming on and wishing much success.
Thanks, Ben.